Well, some big names are in the crosshairs of the BBBEE Commission for alleged fronting or flouting of the BBBEE Act, which many might have thought was just a voluntary code. Well, the debate around broad-based black economic empowerment, particularly from an ownership and management perspective, is emotionally charged, and the solution isn't simply a matter of colouring in by numbers, as Jonathan Goldberg mentions in his book on BBBEE. Fronting, window dressing, certain special purpose vehicles created to profit opportunistic predators through smoke and mirror empowerment schemes have been strongly criticised for creating an unsustainable token empowerment environment. So it's actually good that we're starting to see some teeth, or so it seems, being shown by the BBBEE Commission. Well, I'm joined now by Keith Levenstein, Chairman of the Econoserve Group. Keith, great to chat to you again. It looks like the BBBEE Commission is developing teeth.
Finally, Michael, yes. They officially started on the 1st of April last year. And this is the first time they've issued a big communique specifically naming and shaming 17 different companies. They should have been doing this a long, long time ago.
What does that mean? Just take us back to the formation of the BBBEE Commission. What sort of legal powers does it have to investigate firms for non-compliance with the Act?
Their job is specifically to investigate, also to promote BBBEE and to educate, but specifically they have the duty to investigate any allegations of fronting and report it to the prosecuting authority, and there are a fair amount of penalties that can be applied if a person or a company is found guilty of fronting, including 10 years in jail and 10% of your annual turnover. So it's very draconian.
That is extremely draconian, I would say. I mean, 10% of top line, that's not profit after tax. That could be a fair amount, similar to what the competition authorities can levy as a fine, and 10 years of jail time.
Yeah.
Is that for directors?
That would be for anybody in a company. Obviously, a director, CEO found guilty. That's obviously the top end, but it's really a pretty a serious offence if a person is found guilty. I don't know of any or a lot of criminal cases that have actually been opened. In some cases, there have been fraud cases and people have been found guilty, but the B Commission themselves haven't been that proactive. They have issued a couple of practice guides which are fairly flawed in some cases, and they've given some interpretations that also could be seen to be problematical, but we ourselves have been very concerned that they haven't done enough. So the communique they put out last week is showing that they are doing something. Obviously, they've named 17 companies. They haven't specifically indicated exactly what each company has done, and the chances are most of those companies have not done anything untoward, or many of them might not have, and they will then be found not guilty. But at least the B Commission is investigating, which I'd far rather see them do than not do.
So then what happens from that point? You've been named and now also very publicly shamed. I mean, if you look at MTN, reputational issues at play there, potential reputation and brand damage if it is found guilty. But just by being named, do you as a named entity now have to open up your books to the Commission? They're going to come in and almost perform a mini audit on your BBBEE verifiables. So how does it work in practice?
Indeed, they do have the authority to investigate and to subpoena various organizations and people and do a full investigation, similar to the Competition Commission. In this particular communication, they say they've notified the companies involved, and they've given them 30 days to give their own submissions. Thereafter, if the B Commission finds that there has been criminal intent, they would then call in, I suppose, the National Prosecuting Authority and lay charges go to court. Which in a way would be very good, because it would help us in the industry know what is right and what is wrong. Because there still are the issues of interpretation that we still are grappling with.
That was going to be my next question, though, Keith, because we're talking about something, an area of compliance that is still quite vague and open to interpretation, and from one verification agency to the next, you may get a different answer as to what you should be doing as a company here. So without having any judicial precedence, how are companies to know whether or not they're doing the right thing?
I think the best answer is by looking at the BBBEE Act and the BBBEE codes. Where there could be a grey area, it needs a judge, I suppose, to make the final decision. But in some cases, and I don't know if it applies to any of these 17 that are named, in some cases it's pretty obvious that somebody has done something completely wrong. If you receive or you issue a forged B certificate, if you issue a certificate issued by somebody who isn't accredited to do so, if you give points to someone where they absolutely have no ownership or they have no procurement and any of those other many elements, then it's fairly obvious that there is something that is wrong with it. But I suppose in some of these cases there could be a discussion around have they done it wrong. But you did earlier on name Eskom and SASSA. It's an interesting query that the B Commission has put onto them, because they say that they aren't following procurement policies with regard to issuing of the tender. So it's an indirect criticism of how the Tender Act is working, rather than Eskom themselves are fronting or SASSA themselves are fronting. They award tenders without evaluating the B status properly of the particular supplier to them.
Right. So, I mean, this just indicates the scope of the Commission, the fact that they can go into companies' procurement pipeline and processes. And I know there's been much made specifically around SAA, and there was a tweet by the police minister not too long ago that was fact-checked, and some of it was proven to be factually incorrect. But I think quite ironically for me, Keith, is that 6 of the 17 companies being probed by the Commission are actually those companies themselves, those verification agencies that are there to help corporates with compliance. What does that say about your industry?
It shows that we're probably a little bit dirty. Not that I can absolutely say that any of those verification agencies or consultants who are named have actually done something wrong, because we don't know yet, and the B Commission hasn't given us enough information. But the fact that now does exist that some agencies who haven't been named have been doing a fair amount of bad things, and we see it happen. A company will say to an agency, "I need you to give me a certificate. I'll pay you so much." And this isn't necessarily any of these named companies, but it happens a lot. So one of the bigger problems is each of these consultancies and verification agencies are small businesses. When a large, gigantic corporate comes to them with an account worth R1 million, they're going to find it very difficult not to give them the result that they want. And again, we've seen it happen because these companies, verification agencies, are pretty small.
So you need an effective deterrent, and that's why we see some of these draconian penalties. Who instigates the investigation largely? Is it similar to the competition space, where you need the whistleblower, you need the internal inside whistleblower to really give you that information, or are these assessed at the Commission level and just from a desktop sort of view deemed to be suspicious? How do you think it works?
I suspect that most of these the particular issues that are now on the table were whistleblowers. That somebody complained about not getting his fair share of the deal, or finding some particular problem, and sent it through to the Competition Commission, to the B Commission to investigate. So I think that's how it came along. They have their own ability to investigate, start their own investigations. But I think in this particular case, many were sent through to them. I know one of the companies named was in the newspaper a couple of months ago. That was Netcare. As being involved in it, and maybe that was how the B Commission picked that one up, by reading the newspaper just like anybody else did, and decided to investigate, which again, I suppose that's something that they should be doing. But they should be doing a lot more of this, and stopping what is happening.
Now, one of the country's biggest telecoms companies, MTN, has had its fair share of run-ins with regulators over the last 24 months here and in Nigeria. It's going to be investigated to establish whether the very popular MTN Zakhele and perhaps the not so popular MTN Zakhele Futu follow-on schemes meet the requirements for black ownership elements. If I'm a black shareholder buying into a discounted scheme, owning an economic interest in MTN, why wouldn't this count? It might be an issue around voting rights.
Michael, I don't know why they specifically named Zakhele. I've always taken Zakhele as put onto the pedestal and said this is the best deal that you could ever have. And when I have complained about many other ownership schemes, I've always said to everybody, Zakhele is a scheme that you should try to emulate, because in their particular case, the people bought the shares. They did get a discount, but they actually bought the shares. They were able to resell the shares. They've received economic value. They're receiving the right to voting rights indirectly, which, to my mind, ticks every single box. But maybe somebody has had some problem, and maybe they've done something that I'm not aware of. But I was very surprised to see MTN. I'm not necessarily a fan or not a fan of MTN, and I don't do business with them.
Yeah, well, I carry no candle for MTN, certainly. But when I looked at that, I found it curious, because I went to have a look at the elements of ownership and voting rights, economic interest, ownership fulfillment, net value. There's even bonus points for new entrants and broadening the ownership, and I think that's exactly what they've done through this. So it'll be quite interesting to see how this whole process unfolds. If you're a company and you feel aggrieved, Keith, and you feel unfairly named and shamed through this process, what are your rights?
I don't think that you've got very many. You can go along and put out your own PR and criticize and condemn the B Commission for having named you unfairly. Maybe explain why you think you were named, and explain what you did that was not, in fact, completely wrong. Strange, I haven't seen one of these companies putting out any press release defending themselves, or tweets, or Facebook, you name it. So they haven't said a thing. I don't know why they didn't.
Keith Levenstein, chairman of the Econoserve Group, with the BBBEE Commission's latest salvo into ownership issues around BBBEE and fronting and various other issues. It is certainly time that we shake out a lot of the phantom transactions. Keith, thanks so much for your time.